My name is Peter Zimbor, joined alongside with my broadcast partner, Dan Horgan. Dan, John Duddy is a guy who last fought in February at Madison Square Garden, and he won a majority decision against the unheralded Walid Smith-Shed. Going into that fight, there was a lot of talk that he would get a crack at middleweight champion Kelly Pavlik in his next bout, but he had a tougher than expected time with Smith-Shed in that fight. Obviously, he has not fought for a middleweight championship yet, but he hopes to get there, and the starting point is tonight.
Peter, throughout the history of boxing, Irish fighters have been notorious for their ring valiance. John Duddy might have the problem of being a little bit too Irish. This is a guy who has the offensive tools necessary to become middleweight champion of the world, but oftentimes his heart gets in the way of his defense. Tonight against Charles Howe, Duddy is going to need to get back to defensive basics, because if Duddy can improve his defense, Peter, he has an excellent shot of becoming middleweight champion of the world.
It's interesting to note that as an amateur, John Duddy was known as more of a boxer than a slugger as he has become as a professional. We talked with both John Duddy and Charles Howe before the fight, and here's what they had to say.
Being the underdog doesn't bother me at all because this is boxing. As long as you got two hands and you can punch, anything can happen. That's one thing good about this sport. You can depend on yourself and just yourself.
Well, he's fit, he's ready, he's made weight, he's got a decent enough record, And I think once everybody, they seem to be in the impression once they fight me, they've got a great opportunity to get a lot of exposure. And I see no different with Charles Howe. I think he's coming here to fight and coming here to upset the odds, and I'm going to put a stop to that.
And there you see Charles Howe coming to the ring. Comes into tonight's fight at 17 wins, 4 losses. And his last bout was TKO'd in 1 round by Joey Gilbert from the Contender fame. Following that fight, Joey Gilbert tested positive for anabolic steroids and methamphetamines and is fighting that ruling that he tested positive. That is why the ruling still stands and the fight has not been changed to a no contest. Charles Howe says as a result of the positive test for steroids after the fight, he has put the Joey Gilbert fight in the past, doesn't really consider it a loss. And prior to that, his last loss came in 1999, coincidentally to another alum of the Contender, Cornelius Canine Bundridge.
Right, here comes John Duddy.
And John Duddy now coming to the ring, the wildly popular middleweight contender, in line perhaps for a shot at a middleweight championship of the world, a title currently held by Kelly Pavlik. Interestingly, Charles Howe, Duddy's opponent tonight, is from Ohio. The reigning middleweight champ Kelly Pavlik is from Ohio. Perhaps Charles Howe can be the gatekeeper to Ohio for tonight, and we'll see if John Duddy can pass through that gate and line himself up a shot with the middleweight kingpin.
John Duddy coming out to a little 50 Cent tonight. Usually comes out to bagpipes. Maybe he's trying to win over a new fan base.
Now, we were talking about John Duddy perhaps being in line for a shot at the middleweight championship down the road. If you were to ask John Duddy about a future fight with Kelly Pavlik, his answer will be short and crisp. He is focusing strictly on the fight ahead of him tonight against Charles Howe. He does not want to overlook his opponent. In his last bout, fought the unheralded Walid Smith-Shed at Madison Square Garden on the Sultan Ibragimov Vladimir Klitschko undercard. Had he won that fight convincingly, many said he'd be in line for a shot at Kelly Pavlik's title a few weeks ago, perhaps either in Atlantic City or Madison Square Garden. Duddy won that fight via majority decision, suffered a lot of cuts, and as a result of that, he does not want to overlook an opponent again. It looks like both combatants are in the ring right now, awaiting their official introductions from our ring announcer, John Vina. Listen to the response of the crowd here in Boston for the wildly popular Ireland's John Duddy, describing the atmosphere of a John Duddy fight. I think the only other boxer out there that can compare, and probably excels due to the amount of people who come up to see him in his native homeland, is Ricky the Hitman Hatton.
Certainly, and the fans actually tried to get a Hatton chant going. They were doing the only one John Duddy instead of Ricky Hatton. So, those fans are, Duddy is capitalizing on had success with his fans.
Well, you're going to hear a lot of ole, ole, ole chants across this fight. Ireland's John Duddy, Charles Howe, scheduled for 10 rounds, middleweight. John Duddy in the green trunks with the yellow stripes. Charles Howe in the solid black trunks. Keep in mind, John Duddy coming off what many said one of the worst rounds of his career in round one of the fight against Walid Smith-Jet. Ate a lot of punches, clearly lost the round. Charles Howe coming off a first round knockout. So first round important to both combatants.
Peter, Howe mentioned to us yesterday that what he likes most about Duddy's fighting style is that he comes straight forward. He thinks that that fighting style will play into his game tonight. He wants Duddy to come right at him. He describes himself as a typical boxer puncher, but he wants to trade with Duddy. He wants to get him rocked. That's his game plan for tonight.
And John Duddy, as an amateur, was known as more of a boxer. As a professional, has been known as more of a slugger. Many of his early fights, all of his fights have been wins, but many of his early wins came via early knockout. And perhaps that's what got him into this habit of slugging it up. John Duddy working to the body of Charles Howe. Don't know how much damage it did. It looks like Howe caught it on the forearms, but it certainly gets a rise out of the pro-Duddy crowd here in Boston, Massachusetts. Duddy makes his home now in New York City, originally from Derry, Northern Ireland. Of course, a huge Irish community in Boston and the New England area, and as a result, Duddy has many fans.
You can hear him now, Peter.
So John Duddy looks like he's continuing to work to the body of Charles Howe. Nothing devastating by either fighter coming just yet. John Duddy with a good left jab. And good left of his own by Charles Howe.
It should be noted, Peter, that the only loss Howe has had in the past 9 years was that loss to Joey Gilbert, who did test positive for steroids. This guy, he considers himself undefeated in that time span.
He's put that loss behind him. John Duddy called his last fight against Walid Smith-Jet a step backwards. He hopes to get the momentum rolling forwards with a victory tonight over Charles Howe. And John Duddy, one of those guys, just puts people in the seats each and every time he fights. Has sold out the theater at Madison Square Garden a few times. Good crowd here tonight in Boston, and brings people to see him in his homeland in Ireland.